Good afternoon, and welcome journalists from across Africa to the U.S. Department of State's Africa Regional Media Hub. My name is Philip Assis, and I'm the director of the Hub. I'm pleased to be joined in the studio today by Catherine Heiner, who is the Intellectual Property Attaché for Sub-Saharan Africa with the U.S. Patent and Trade Office. Catherine and I are both based physically in Johannesburg, which is why we're both physically in the studio today. And she just completed a workshop these past couple of days here in Johannesburg, which I was privileged to moderate, on intellectual property with the music industry. That conference was on the heels of a similar conference in Lagos, which itself was on the heels of a similar conference in Geneva. This is all part of a new US government initiative called IP for Growth. And we've invited Ms. Heiner to the studio today to talk about that conference and that initiative. Today's briefing is on the record, and you may quote our guest by name and title. So, Catherine, before we turn to our questions, I wonder if you could just tell us a bit about the conference and this IP for Growth initiative and what it's all about.
Yeah, thanks so much, and such a pleasure to be with you virtually this afternoon. To talk about our IP for Growth initiative. This is a year-long program that showcases how robust IP protection and enforcement empowers the creative economy across Africa. So as you noted, we kicked this off in Geneva with a panel discussion on the margins of the World Intellectual Property Organization's General Assemblies. From there, we held workshops in Lagos and Johannesburg to take the conversation from the multilateral space to the creators, entrepreneurs, and policymakers doing the hard work on the ground to capture the value of two emerging creative powerhouses. The events brought together government policymakers with the private sector, which included musical artists, creators, producers, industry executives, entertainment lawyers, have to include the lawyers, and others. The creative economy is growing and changing rapidly, and there's an insatiable appetite for African music worldwide. It's a sector with the potential to drive economic growth. So I'm working with stakeholders across governments and the creative industries to help strengthen IP frameworks so that rights holders are able to participate in and capitalize on this rapidly growing sector. So in the workshops, we explored a range of topics, from the adaptations required for the digital age to the basics of who owns what when it comes to a sound recording. And the discussions were dynamic and grappled with the same goal, which is how to harness strong IP systems, such as the one we have in the US, to drive economic growth and empower local talent to compete in the global creative economy. So from the artist and entrepreneur in South Africa who said, taking care of IP is loving yourself, to the head of the Nigerian Copyright Commission, who went so far as to give out his direct email address to the whole audience. Participants and audience members demonstrated the importance of these conversations and the need to carry the momentum out of the room to advocate for strong IP protections in the region. And this is really important because too often when we're discussing the creative economy, we neglect to acknowledge the economic reality of what the industries bring to the table. And one of the themes that was repeated throughout the series is that music is not just for fun, it is a business. The International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, IFPI's latest numbers show that the Sub-Saharan Africa region continues to advance. In fact, SSA markets have grown by double-digit figures for the past 5 years in a row. And as impressive as those figures are, we know there's a lot left on the table. And we believe that IP will drive future growth. And this isn't just conjecture. We have the data on return on investments in our own IP systems in the US to back up that optimism. So I have to brag about the US. Since the inception, the United States has recognized the importance of intellectual property, enshrining IP protection in the heart of the US Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, securing for the limited time for authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. And that foundational commitment has proved its value throughout our history. So a few weeks ago, the USPTO released its most comprehensive report yet on this data and the economic contributions of IP-intensive industries. It was using 2024 data. And so I have to go over the highlights, indulge me. So in 2024, industries that intensively use at least one form of IP, 11.4 trillion in US gross domestic product, 44% of total private sector GDP, supported 65.8 million jobs. That's 44% of private sector jobs in the US. And the IP-intensive industries accounted for $1.58 trillion in commodity exports. That's like more than 80% of commodity export value. So that's nearly half of the entire national economy. That's nearly half of all jobs. And that's what the strong IP systems can build. And that's what we wanted to bring to the table here. So specifically, the copyright-intensive industries, that was the heart of these discussions. And so we have additional data on those. And so those copyright industries in the US, so that's sound recording, motion picture and video production, software publishing, broadcasting, performing arts, wide range, that shows the largest earnings premium of any IP category. So the workers in those copyright intensive industries earned on average 130% more than workers in non-IP intensive industries. That's not a marginal difference, right? That's transformational. And so between 2014 and 24, so the past decade, those copyright-intensive industries, the earnings premium increased by 30%, which is the largest of any IP category. So it shows us that the copyright in the digital age, the value of it, it's not declining, it's growing. So again, music isn't just a mood or a vibe, it is a business. And the discussions in Lagos and Joburg reinforce that this kind of growth requires two key things: the up-to-date IP laws on the books and the political will to fully implement them. Policymakers have to commit to sustained investments in the administration and enforcement of rights. So that includes recruiting and training staff, to facilitating open dialogue with right holders in their markets. For rights holders to capitalize on the creativity, they have to be able to rely on transparent and accountable mechanisms for managing and monetizing their IP. And we also have to provide education and training IP. We heard this over and over again in the workshop, not only for those charged with administering the laws, but to the general public as well. And piracy presents a major threat to the creative industry, and yet many still believe it's a victimless crime. Not just wrong, it's dangerous. I'm grateful to my colleagues at the U.S. missions to Geneva, Nigeria, and South Africa, as well as industry partners such as Universal Music Group, for convening these important discussions at WIPO and on the ground at Lagos and Joburg. We really need the multilateral and bilateral engagement to share best practices and address those challenges of today's global marketplace. And I really look forward to bringing the successes and challenges raised in these workshops back to Geneva for our finale event. We'll be in December at the meeting of the WIPO Standing Committee on Copyright and Related Rights in Geneva. And so, like I said, there's more discussions ahead and more work to be done, but we're just really inspired by the talent and initiative of the creatives in the African space and look forward to continuing the conversations.
Wow, thank you. Those figures are staggering, and it's really the launch of something new, the beginning of a new movement here in Africa. So it's time to turn now to our questions. For those of you who would like to pose any live questions, we ask that you do that in the Q&A tab, not the chat box, the Q&A. And please just put your name and outlet and what country you're writing in from. And be aware that from our end, we only see your Zoom login. So we will turn now to our first question, which came in from Ms. Maya Plentz of The Brief. And she asks, what concrete reforms does the United States support to ensure that stronger IP protection translates into higher revenue for African creators?
Yeah, it's an important question, especially in this moment. It's a really exciting time in Africa's music industry. And as I mentioned, the growth just shows the potential and the opportunity for artists to really capture that value. So, of course, strong copyright protection can enable this. It protects their creations and awards an investment. And for us, concrete reforms, there are steps that can be taken at the national level to help foster this growth. And two of the things I really want to highlight are the WIPO Copyright Treaty and the WIPO Performances and Phonograms Treaty. And those collectively, we call them the WIPO Internet Treaties. And so when countries ratify those and fully implement them at the national level, they provide a legal structure to help artists be fully compensated for their work. And this involves some really specific technical protections, technical protection measures, or we call them TPMs, as well as rights management information, or RMI. So those protections for TPMs and RMI, they underpin the recent development of digital distribution models. So that's the streaming or the digital downloads, which have opened up markets and allow artists to monetize their songs even when traditional distribution models have historically been unavailable or inaccessible to them. And there's also an opportunity to build out the operation of well-functioning collective management organizations, the CMOs we heard about in the Joburg workshop. So CMOs help artists manage their rights and provide an efficient mechanism for the large-scale licensing of works in instances where direct licensing or like a work-by-work basis is impractical or impossible. So the ability for artists to enforce their rights effectively is really crucial. And so having a copyright in your work means little if there's no practical means of enforcing your rights. So,
great. Okay, thank you. Our next question comes from Ms. Isabel Martha Nakira of Feature Story News in Uganda. And she asks, how important is strong intellectual property protection in attracting investment into Africa's creative economy? And can better IP systems turn music and other creative industries into a major source of jobs, exports, and economic growth?
Oh gosh, fundamental, right? So the answers are very important and yes, right? So from our perspective, again, you need those strong IP laws. You have to have that framework in place as a starting point to advance the creative industries in the region. And again, that is just fundamental. That's part of the U.S. model, is that sustained investment. And so that means the laws on the books and the political will, right? Again, that two-part, the two key ingredients. So we need those strong, consistent laws that are going across the borders. It's a digital marketplace. Artists have to have some level of expectation of similarity in the laws. And as I mentioned, it's fundamental to us. We have the data to show that the IP-intensive industries in the U.S. that are protected by a strong framework are thriving. Half of all jobs, right? Half of all GDP, like I said. And then again, the copyright industry specifically. So with respect to SSA, the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, which is IFPI, they do an annual report, which is really required reading. And their latest figures show that SSA markets have grown by double digits for the past 5 years consecutively. So we know the value is there. We just have to invest in the frameworks to take it to the next level.
Wow. Lots going forward for Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
Our third question is also from Uganda, from Mr. Michael Kintu Beleke. He asks, Africa's music and creative industries are growing rapidly, but many African artists and creators still struggle to earn from their work internationally. Mm-hmm. What are the biggest IP gaps preventing African creators from fully monetizing their content globally? And what lessons can Africa take from the U.S. system?
Again, this was just the topic of conversation in Lagos and Joburg. So again, the talent and demand is there, element one, but the value is slipping through the gap. So one of the presentations we had in both sessions was by the Music Economy Develop Initiative. And they have data on a bunch of markets, and they found that in Kenya and Nigeria alone, 286 million in recorded revenue is left uncollected each year. What a loss. While the specific pain points can vary from market to market, we've kind of kept coming back to 3 main opportunities for improvement here. That's increasing transparency and accountability in collection processes, including the CMOs, raising public awareness and providing education to both the artists and the broader community about IP rights and obligations, and then arming those enforcement entities and agencies with the necessary resources to address piracy. Mm-hmm. In terms of lessons from the U.S., I think the bottom line is that we've made sustained investments in all 3 of those areas, and we're seeing the return on that investment now. We have an ongoing dialogue with our rights holders so we can stay on top of changes and continue to capitalize on our creative industry.
Thank you for that. Our next question comes from Mr. Kamal Mansari of Jeune Independent in Algeria. And he asks, given the rapid growth of digital streaming platforms and the rise of cross-border collaborations between American and African artists, what specific legal or enforcement mechanisms are currently being prioritized to protect digital copyright and ensure fair compensation for creators in both markets?
Again, I'm going to broken record, but you have to ratify those key IP treaties, such as the Copyright Treaty and the WPPT, the Performances and Phonograms Treaty. Again, that's what brings us into the digital age. And so that is really, I think, a very important piece of the pie to put in there. We also are supporting efforts to enforce across borders. And so we have an organization, the Homeland Security Investigations Unit, which has done really impressive work with regional entities, with governments across the world, and stakeholders. So recently, they had an operation during the World Cup, and they took down 1,000 infringing pirate sites, right? Which is huge, as we're infringing these copyright industries. And again, we have to link this back to the fact that these types of operations, these types of cross-agency collaborations, they are addressing not only the rights holders' issues, but they're addressing those inputs, the money that's flowing into organized crime that's coming from pirate websites.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's huge. Our fifth question comes today from Mr. Ross Moyo of Technomag in Zimbabwe. And he asks about Zimbabwe's music industry on platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify is growing fast, but piracy remains huge. What specific IP tools can the USPTO offer African artists to monetize and protect music internationally?
So one of the best tools that we're facilitators, right? So we bring together the government officials, we bring together the industry and the local creators to work, again, like I mentioned in the last question, across the borders with our agencies, our law enforcement agencies, the IPR Center, the agencies on the ground, to help have fulsome conversation. And so we're here to facilitate that dialogue, to provide support, and again, to reinforce the importance to governments about the need to invest in those systems to address piracy and other, digital age issues.
Okay, great. Our next question is also from Zimbabwe, and that is that your biography mentions capacity building for patent and trademark examiners. Are there ongoing programs with ZIPO, that's the Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office, and what's been the impact so far?
Yeah. So I'll say that we don't have any ongoing partnerships right now with ZIPO, but we are always really eager to hear from the offices and the stakeholders in each country to understand the challenges and how we can plug in for potential collaboration. And so one of the ways I want to highlight that we've just started to do that in the region is called the Accelerated Patent Grant Agreement. And also in Geneva, on the margins of the World Intellectual Property Organization's General Assemblies in July, we signed an APG with Ghana, and this was the first time that the USPTO signed an APG with an IP office in Africa. And what this does is really important. Number one, it streamlines the review process for offices that often have, few examiners or, are working to build up their knowledge. And it also allows a U.S. rights holder, someone who's already secured a U.S. patent in the U.S., to request that the Ghana IP office there, that they grant their patent application on the basis of that already granted U.S. right. So it streamlines it for the reviewers, it streamlines it for the stakeholders. And so there, we also provide training and collaboration. So again, lots of options, and we'd love to hear more from the different markets.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. We only have time for one more question, but since there have been several questions that have come in about artificial intelligence, let me just combine them into one and ask what you can tell us about AI and its relationship to intellectual property.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic. So copyright protection plays a central role in safeguarding the creative works of artists, authors, and innovators, and serving as a foundation for fostering continued innovation in AI technologies. So of course, the interplay between those two presents some complex legal and policy questions across jurisdictions. But we think that established legal doctrines such as fair use and fair dealing will really play a critical role in balancing the interests of the creators and the innovators. So we think that fact-based inquiries will help resolve those questions via established legal processes.
Great. Catherine Heiner, Intellectual Property Attaché for Sub-Saharan Africa with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. It's been great having you here in the studio. I'd like to also thank journalists from across Africa who have joined us. We will have a transcript and recording of today's press briefing available to you, to all registered journalists, shortly, as soon as we can produce them. If you have any questions about today's briefing, you can write to us at the Africa Media Hub. The address is afmediahub@state.gov. And if you publish any stories, we would welcome getting a link to your story at that same email address. I'd also like to invite everyone who's not already following us on X to follow us at Africa Media Hub, and for our French speakers, We also have @USA en Français. Thank you all. I wish you all a very pleasant rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.